решение. Хватит уже просто жить и говорить по-русски. Надо жить и говорить по-русски для тех, кто не знает правду про Украину. И мы этим будем заниматься. С вами были Екатерина Свердловского и Сергей. Незримо присутствовал Тимур Одесский. Слава Украине!
Громадская где? Везде.
Good evening from Kyiv, Ukraine. This is the Sunday show on Hromadske International, the only primetime show broadcasting on the Eastern European geopolitical storm in English. Now, as always, we want to encourage you to get connected using Twitter and our hashtag Hromadske, as well as our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Hromadske International.
Actually, you can tweet your questions on our Twitter account using the hashtag Hromadske, and we definitely will profile all your questions, or even if you have comments. Actually, we have a lot to cover today and a great guest list for you. So again, go on Twitter, tweet with the hashtag Hromadske, and you become a part of our show too. And as I understand right now, we can already see some reactions online. And actually, what up today for our show? Yeah.
Well, today we want to take a look at the coalition. We had the first session of the new Ukrainian parliament, which was this Thursday. And we have an infographic we want to put up as well. Yes, that's there, which is excellent. This is the first time that we're seeing this kind of what's been called a broad coalition. So there are 5 pro-Western parties that are in coalition together. The largest is President Petro Poroshenko's bloc, followed by the People's Front. Now, that is the party of former and now current Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk. And then we also have the Radicals. We have Yulia Tymoshenko's party, and Samopomych is in there as well. So one of the questions we're looking at is how they're able to work together. There are key votes this past week on the Prime Minister that got Yatsenyuk back in, as well as Groisman from Poroshenko's bloc as the Speaker of the Rada. And the question that we kind of want to look at is whether or not this coalition can hold and how they're able to function together. For you now, though, we want to play a video of Poroshenko's speech that he opened the Rada with this past Thursday.
Третьою світовою війною нас лякати не треба. Насправді розпочинати її ніхто не збирається. І це теж важливо врахувати в аналізі. Отже, ми з вами, шановні новообрані народні депутати, шановний український народ, живемо в умовах війни. Ця війна безумовно гальмує наші плани. Ну, наприклад, як переконати інвесторів вкладати гроші в державу, яка воює? Яким чином можна забезпечити стале зростання країни, коли значна частина економіки просто зруйнована фізично? І на ці питання ми з вами спільно маємо знайти відповіді. 100% українців зараз за єдину державу. За єдину країну. Конституційна більшість українців бачить її унітарною країною. Ніяких федералізацій. І це, до речі, палкий привіт тим, хто зі Сходу чи з Заходу радить нам федералізуватися. Чому привіт? Ви можете радити, але українці проти. І ми нарешті є владою, яка вміє чути і здійснювати мрії українців.
All right. right, and now we're joined by Alex Ryabchyn, who's a new MP from the Batkivshchina party. Great to have you here today.
Yeah. Hello, guys.
So the first question I have for you, in the speech that Tymoshenko had given, one of his comments is, we finally have a government that can realize the dreams of all Ukrainians. Is that true? Is that something this Rada can do?
Well, not government, maybe we didn't have a government
Yet, yeah.
Yeah, so, but the parliament, definitely we have like more than 300 MPs in a coalition. We can change the constitution. And it's like the first time the pro-European majority we have in the parliament, and with the perspective of the enlargement. So some people argue that it could be like 310 people or even more. So definitely we have the instrument right now, and the question is how we use this instrument or this tool to change the country.
And this is, what you're talking about is the so-called supermajority or a constitutional majority that allows the constitution to be changed. So there's this tremendous potential to get things done. What was the atmosphere on Thursday? I mean, was there a pressure on the part of MPs and people in the Rada to try and do things quickly? What did it feel like?
Yeah, we feel the pressure, we feel this, the tension that we need to do as quick as possible. But the very first day was not, was not tense. It was an easy voting because everybody felt that the prime minister should be Yatsenyuk, Groisman should be the speaker. He went to our party meeting at the Batkivshchina office, presented himself as a speaker, and it was like one of the first ever, speaker, the candidate for a speaker went to political parties to speak, to answer the question. So it was a truly, transparent procedure. So it wasn't any surprise that like we will have these people, and there were some other, technical voting. So it was an easy voting, but I understand that it's just the beginning, and we need to work as hard as possible to change the country.
Actually, I want to profile our explainer on this, as you said, new historic supermajority, and I want our producers to put it on the screen. And basically, it's really fresh explainer. What we're trying to focus on, and what's kind of the biggest issue right now at the moment, whether or not Ukraine will be able to transition from politics of personalities to politics of issues. And actually, that's actually a crucial point to go for politics of reforms. And there are a lot of people talking about reforms, but whether or not it's an issue still. And as our explainer shows, there are a lot of great and powerful personalities in Ukrainian politics still. And this could be an issue for potential fallout in coalition building, new brawls, as we saw before in Ukrainian politics, nothing new.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, there are lots of opinion that this coalition will be break up, split up in spring. But some others said like it could be a strong coalition. My intention that this coalition will be in power, for 5, 10, or 15 year time. I don't know for how long, but definitely there are challenges that we need to overcome. For example, there are like 5 parties, and the decision will be made by the consensus. And there are some, some like principal moments. For example, we are not agreed with the end of moratorium for the selling the land, and some parties wanted to do this. So there will be some principal moments that we will not maybe have the 300 votes, but all the decision will be made by the consensus moment. And as you saw, like, we formed the coalition. We voted for the coalition, for the prime minister, and also for the speaker in one day. So it was like the quickest ever, I would argue, the voting for this candidate. So we already showed the effectiveness of this coalition. I could argue that like this Tuesday, we will vote for the cabinet of ministers, for the committees, and we'll start working.
Well, I mean, I think that's what people are waiting for. I mean, these sort of procedural things, even if they're going faster, I mean, it's a good sign, but what people are waiting for are the big reforms and whether or not can be delivered on that level. Just since you'd mentioned it, and something people have been talking about, it's whether or not the coalition can stand, whether it can hold together, because it is a broad coalition, there's different parties, very different strong personalities, and there's one article I just want to ask our producers to put up that was from The Economist this week, and one of the things they were talking about is the relationship between Mr. Tymoshenko and Mr. Yatsenyuk. And if I were to quote it, it talks about how they've never been close, that Western allies want them to work together, but they often butt heads. And that, for Ukraine has a very special meaning because after the Orange Revolution, people talk a lot about Yushchenko and Tymoshenko butting heads, and just the fact that ideological overlap isn't necessarily the ability to work together, especially when personalities get there. I don't know, what's your take on that? Are personalities leading politics now, or is it values and ideas, or just concrete priorities?
I also was one of the contributors to this article with The Economist. I met with the author and spoke like around 2 hours about this. Yeah, there is a concern about the two. Like the point is that the people of Ukraine voted for the two political powers, one represented by the president, another represented by the prime minister, to form to be the lead in the coalition. And everything now is about ambition. So whether these two people are able to put down their ambitions and to work for the benefit of Ukraine. For example, our party already stated that we are not like to boost this coalition agreement to decrease the time of forming it. We already said that we decline to fight for the minister position. It doesn't mean that we are not have any good candidates. We have lots of professionals that we are ready to form the cabinet of ministers.
Well, does that mean there won't be any ministers from Backdoor? Is that clear?
We are not lobbying for it. If our partners will propose it, we have lots of candidates. But it doesn't really mean that we will not take part in the reform in the country.
Actually, that's a very interesting question because a lot of analysts and even people inside the parliament now say that, for example, Radical Party of Oleg Leshko and Batkivshina, they're kind of let's just say the weakest links in the coalition because they have a lot of differences with People's Front or Petro Poroshenko parties. And in case that this politics of personas, the politics of personalities will prevail, those parties are actually more likable to exit the coalition as soon as possible. Do you feel that it could be the case in this parliament, and what really could stick together all the parties for a long run, which is kind of needed for long run reforms, right? You cannot go for reforms in 2 months. You need at least.
So basically, what I've heard all the time from Batkivshina's negotiation in the inner party meeting, that we would like to be this glue that stick up the coalition itself. Because as you said, our leader, Yulia Tymoshenko, knows how it, when there are two strong political figures and then in conflict, she knows how to solve it. So we will be some kind of peacemakers if it needed. So we don't have any intentions to split up the coalition and like.
Well, Yulia Tymoshenko as a peacemaker is an interesting new role for her. I was impressed on Thursday because when she was out in the hallway outside, she was walking around, and Batkivshina is a smaller party in the coalition, but she still had all the journalists and everyone following her around.
The point is that she had her birthday, and
that's what it was.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons that a lot of journalists wanted to speak with her.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was really pleasure when all the president, the prime minister, all the notable person went to Yulia and to congratulate her, and all the time. And I'm sitting next to behind her, and when the president spoke his speech, I saw that he definitely looked at her, and sometimes I felt that he looked directly at my eyes. So so it's a pleasure that our leader is on the bigger.
It was on a larger scale. She gets attention.
Sure, yeah.
That's absolutely there.
Actually, if our producers could put back this graph we have on Ukraine parliament fractions, and actually the thing that I want to point out is that we have a lot of independent MPs still in the parliament, and that was one of the biggest surprises because we all thought that all those independents, at least around 100 of them, will join the opposition fraction right away because they were elected through the different system, but through the different process, but they share the same political interests. But what we see right now that we have just 40 members in the opposition bloc, and we have over 43 members independents and over 40 members just in parliamentary groups, which is not fractions. The question right now, how you will get on board them to proceed with reforms, to negotiate, to have common interest. Do you need them? And if not, whether or not it creates stable reformist atmosphere inside the parliament if you have over 100 MPs that are kind of not the part of the process?
I spoke with lots of people who are not the part of the coalition. They said that they will vote for the good laws that they will support, and of course they will not vote for those that they
What
didn't
good
like.
laws for them?
For example, we spoke with the people from Svoboda Party that they don't have fraction, but they have 6 or 7 people, 7 MPs, and they said that they are not consider themselves as an opposition. They will have some kind of their own position, their own interest, because people who voted for them, they, according to their party programs, they will vote for that they supported. But they don't consider themselves as an opposition, so basically there are lots of other people who have their special meaning, and I don't think that it will be a
So
huge
they are
problem.
fragmented and not...
Yet.
Okay.
Yet.
But you see the potential for them to join either side, or is too early to call?
Yeah, it's too early to call for for this configuration in the parliament, because as I said, now we have
Right.
302 MPs in the coalition, but some people said it might be it might be changed, maybe 310 or more. So let's just wait, because the parliament just started working.
So basically you have this huge pool of independent MPs. You can grab from that pool whether anytime you need a majority.
The point is that they need to join the fraction, one of the fraction, to become the part of the coalition. So not a single member.
No, I mean when it comes to the just regular voting process.
Yeah, sure. Why not? And also we will have the so-called opposition day on Wednesday, I think, and the opposition will be able to present their laws, and if they have good laws, like why shouldn't we vote
Well, I
for
know
them?
opposition bloc considered the political successor to the Party of the Regions.
Yep.
They're supposed to present their alternative program of reforms, something different.
Honestly saying, they're not presenting their reforms. I look through the laws that they registered, so they're trying to show that they are social. They care about the social issue of the people from the Donbass, and they're trying to say that we will support the the pensioners.
They're voters, actually. Those people are voted for them in great numbers, especially in the east or southern provinces.
I'm from Donbass itself, so for me, when we had lots of these protests in March, in April, in May, when me and my guys try to do the pro-Ukrainian rallies. Honestly saying, I I haven't seen any constructive position of the Party of Region itself, and now they're trying to show that we are the only one who care about the people of Donbass. But seems to me that it's just it's not their interest.
Well, as someone, originally from Donbass, what made you choose to go to Batkivshina as a party to
I would
remove
argue
from
that the
their list?
Batkivshina was the time the only me and the number 5 I'm the number 9 on the Batkivshina, and number 5 is Alyona Shkrum. We were chosen by the open competition as the part of the professional government initiative, the Western dedicated people who returned to Ukraine, and we won this competition. And Batkivshina was the only first who provided this open competition, and the only party who said that the Minsk agreement wasn't the right case for Donbass. So the Batkivshina ideology was fully corresponded with mine.
And so, what do you think is the right case for Donbass at this point? If it's not the Minsk agreement, is there a position you want to see advanced?
Sure, I see that the level of Minsk agreement is not the one that could, end this conflict. I think that it should be increased at least to Geneva format or even J7 format, because the agreement that's signed by with all my respect, with the ambassador of Russia on behalf of the whole Russia is not the papers that's signed by Cameron, Obama, Merkel, Poroshenko, and Mr. Putin. So I think this kind of agreement could work, but that we see that every day Ukrainian soldiers are dying, Ukrainian citizens are dying in the conflict. So it just frees the conflict or maybe decrease the tensions, but conflict is still ongoing.
With such big issues, what can a small party hope to achieve in the Rada? something like Batkivshina, to what extent can they work on their own? To what extent can they have influence?
Basically, if you look at the coalition agreement, all our I would say demands were heard by the coalition, and we could see that the rejection of the non-block status, joining NATO, the moratorium on the selling the land, the case with Nadia Savchenko, social protection. So we have all our critical demands heard by the coalition. So the people who voted for us for our program, we will continue to realize it. Yeah.
And what are your top priorities? I mean, what do you think the Rada can achieve before New Year's? Is there something that can be done?
Like we already registered the law on the immunity, MP's immunity, which is one of the crucial cases where lots of businessmen went to parliament not to work on the development of Ukraine, but to have some kind of immunity on the criminal prosecution. So we already registered.
And that's something not everyone knows, that MPs in Ukraine traditionally have immunity from prosecution. Not prosecution.
We're not registered. Because we should change the constitution. We started the procedure to sign to collect the signature for these amendments to the constitution, and we are trying to push them through.
But do you think that's possible before New Year's? Can that be done?
I think we should possibly. I don't think that we will. We will adopt this law, but we will start this process already before the new year. We will be able to do this.
To start to work towards that.
Actually, I want to address our viewers right now. And again, if you have any questions to our guests or any comments, you can go on Twitter, tweet with Hromadske hashtag, and we will definitely profile your tweets. And actually, what I want to profile right now is that your comment about Yulia Tymoshenko being a peacemaker, possible peacemaker in a new parliament, some people, like for example, our regular viewer Nikolai Holmov, he's a famous blogger from Odessa, he called it comedy night on Hromadske, but because of really harsh legacy of previous parliament and their inability to find compromises. And I think if we have time for just last question on that particular topic, and I won't go back to the opposition, I want to go back to those over 100 MPs in Ukrainian parliament. Over last years or even over last decade, this really toxic atmosphere of corruption was present in Ukrainian parliament. Is there any kind of fear that having so much unallied MPs in the parliament will create this pool for possible corruption because you can buy those votes really easily because they're not inside fractions? That's what actually happened many times before, even with people in fractions. But now you have no absolutely legal obligation. You can vote whatever you want if you're an independent MPs and you have 100 votes that you can actually buy. And let's be frank about it, buying votes in Ukrainian parliament is very popular tradition for over a decade or even more.
Like one of the reasons why the previous parliament bought the votes is that they didn't have enough. They didn't have 226 votes to pass the law. That's why there was some parliamentary groups that tried to parasitize on this. But now we have lots of votes. Like nobody needs to do this. And it would be interesting to see that there are some people who voted for so-called dictatorship laws. So if they will vote for to support some laws and other parties reject, I think it will be a big, huge scandal. So I don't think that it will be the case right now in this parliament.
But looking forward, forward towards this week, we expect to have a government announced. May not happen, but to have some more other ministers named. Now, in his speech, Tymoshenko on Thursday talked about wanting to change the laws so that foreigners could have ministerial positions and could be involved. And we also have an article from the Kyiv Post, which maybe our producers can put up, just talking about how Western firms, so Peterson and Partners, also working with Korn Ferry, had identified 24 names based on interviews, people who would be good for Ukraine's cabinet. This was done by the Soros's Renaissance Foundation. They say this costs $82,000 to do all of this. And what do you see the role of foreigners there? Does Ukraine need foreigners? Is this helpful? Is this distracting? What kind of cabinet does Ukraine need, especially for the economy, and to put kind of confidence there?
Okay, so basically, when the president announced this, there was some everybody started not shouting. Everybody started, what he said, like foreigners, like it was something interesting that nobody heard about this. So, you know, my criteria for the foreign, like, I'm easy with this. It's like, I'm easy for some, you know, as I call it, you know, sexy reforms or something like this, something new, you know, something innovative. Maybe this could change this country, so I'm not afraid of foreigners, but I would see not the person itself. I would like to see his professional, his profile, whether he's patriotic, so he need to change the citizenship to become, to accountable somehow to the Ukrainian people. And of course, I want to hear his program. As like I studied in the United Kingdom, like technology and adaptation of technology in technological innovation, and I know that not every, not one size does not fit it all. So I want to hear how he will adapt his knowledge, his experience to the Ukrainian reality. And if this person will be good, like I will vote for him. But the main question is right now, and I want to hear the answer, who will be responsible for these foreigners? What political party, the coalition itself, and etc.
So you're concerned
Actually,
that loose cannons there?
Yeah, I'm easy with this decision, but there are some questions, yeah.
There is a very interesting comment this week about the news of appointing a foreigner from Yevgen Vorobyov, his famous analyst. And actually, what he said that he thinks it's just popular, basically, and outsourcing of responsibility. Yes, I just wanted to profile that.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think you made a great point that it's all in the details, and we'll certainly be looking for all of those. Thank you so much for joining us. Now we want to bring your attention to a video just showing the signing of the coalition agreement, some of the events that have gone on this week to the start of the new legislative session.
За всю історію незалежності український народ вперше дав проєвропейським, проукраїнським силам конституційний мандат. 300 голосів сьогодні є в нової української більшості. Для реалізації як цієї коаліційної угоди я окремо хотів би зазначити і подякувати за ту плідну роботу, яка була зроблена політичними силами в відкритому і професійному режимі.
В цій угоді дуже велика частина присвячена миру, поверненню миру в Україну. І один з кроків, який треба зробити в першу чергу, це зняття позаблокового статусу, який під час правління режиму був встановлений на законодавчому рівні.
І сьогодні кожен з нас, хто підписує цю коаліційну угоду, усвідомлює свою відповідальність перед Господом Богом і перед громадянами України. Мільйони людей за нас проголосували з однією метою. Вони хочуть радикальних і рішучих змін. Саме тому ми в коаліції, саме тому ми будемо підтримувати уряд реформаторів, саме тому ми будемо голосувати за Арсенія Яценюка на посаду прем'єр-міністра, як людини, яка здатна тягнути цей воза. І наша фракція Радикальної партії у Верховній Раді буде підтримувати реформатські дії уряду і парламенту. Всі, хто за нас голосував, вони вимагають одного – рішучих дій, швидких дій, реальної зміни ситуації. От саме тому ми йдемо в цю коаліцію.
All right, so now we want to move in a slightly different direction. This week we had an announcement about new airline regulations. One of those regulations would require all companies operating international flight routes to be at least 50% owned either by Ukrainian citizens or by the Ukrainian state. One of the budget airlines, Wizz Air, had threatened to pull out of Ukraine because of that, making it much more difficult, and there was a very influential open letter that went out this week. So now we're going to be joined by Volodymyr Bilotkach, who's the senior lecturer in
Volodymyr Bilotkach.
Senior lecturer in economics at Newcastle University and co-editor of the Journal of Air Transport Management.
And he's joining us by Skype, as I understand. Volodymyr, can you hear us? I think we have some sound problems and we cannot hear Volodymyr. Volodymyr, can you hear us?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Great, thanks for joining us tonight. And I want to start with this statement that Ian mentioned, and you actually a part of this statement. You signed it. It's from this very popular, very famous analyst group, Vox Ukraine. And the statement says that these new aviation rules is a smoking gun, proving that the Ukrainian government does not want reforms. Do you agree with this kind of type of characterization of these aviation rules? And do you think it's really something that we should talk and discuss a lot, especially on these initial stages of the forming new Ukrainian government?
Of course, since my name is on this statement, then I clearly have endorsed that is in it. And well, my biggest problem that I have with it is not so much the ownership restriction as the other thing, which is the requirement that any airline that wants to be designated to fly internationally from Ukraine also has to serve a domestic Ukrainian market. This is clearly a discriminatory rule, which clearly favors the largest carrier in Ukrainian market, which happens to be Ukraine International Airlines. And it does signal to the rest of the world that Ukrainian government, the new Ukrainian government, which declares itself committed to reform and market liberalization, is in fact interested in continuing to create those artificial barriers to competition that the old Ukrainian government has become quite famous for.
So basically, you're saying that's lobbying on a part of bigger business structure. For example, we're talking right now about Ukrainian International Airlines, which is the biggest airline carrier in Ukraine, and that's the company that will win the most out of these regulations, right?
Yes, exactly. So if these regulations are enacted, well, I know that for now they have been sort of put on hold. So if these regulations are enacted, then indeed it will be easier for Ukraine International Airlines to get designated to fly internationally from Ukraine.
But again, I want to clarify here that these regulations, that's not something illegal or something that the Ukrainian government doesn't have right to do, right, as I understand. But what it does, it just limits the competition. And supporters of these regulations, in particular Ukrainian government, they say that the situation on the Ukrainian market is aviation market is very harsh, especially they lost Donetsk region, which was kind of really big for aviation industry in Ukraine, for aviation business. They lost Crimea, which is also a very important region for them. And they need some kind to save the Ukrainian aviation industry. Why do you think that these kind of protective measures are not very helpful?
Okay, so first of all, on your point that the regulation is not illegal, well, it is not illegal, but that's not the relevant issue. The relevant issue is that the regulations that have been proposed are creating an uneven playing field for different competitors. If, for instance, something like that were to appear on the table of the European Commission's Director General for Competition, I'm quite sure that it would not take them long to to abolish, to prohibit such rules from ever coming into force. Well, as for the Ukrainian domestic market, it is true that two largest routes, that's Kyiv Simferopol and Kyiv Donetsk, have been lost, and well, for now I would say indefinitely, due to actions of Ukraine's neighbor. And it is true that the domestic Ukrainian market is not in a very good state. Well, if you add to this the decline in consumer disposable income and devaluation of the Ukrainian national currency. I mean, all these things, of course, do not help domestic Ukrainian market, to say the least. However, well, if you want to, well, first of all, do you have to preserve the domestic flights? I mean, currently there are flights on a number of routes. The market is quite thin. I doubt that it would be able to sustain enough competition or much competition at this stage. However, if you want to develop the Ukrainian market, the domestic market, what you have to do is, well, first of all, open it up to competition so that every airline that wants to fly between any two endpoints can do so. Second of all, well, just regulate the safety and that's it. And second of all, focus on reforming the Ukrainian economy so that it becomes easier.
Volodymyr,
yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupting you, but as I understand, this conflict, the whole scandal revolves again around Ukrainian international airlines, and they're tied to this, I think right now, the most powerful Ukrainian oligarch, Hromadske, and actually what a lot of analysts see here is lobbying on part of his company at the moment. Is that the case here? And if it is, what to make out of those messages and statements we got this week from Ukrainian tax authorities, and they're actually arrested some of bank accounts of Hromadske's Ukrainian International Airlines. It's really confusing. I mean,
well, so I'm not going to comment much on lobbying. I mean, it looks like there has been some lobbying behind the scenes, so just indirectly you see the rules which sort of benefit the largest carrier, and also, well, so it means that probably the owners have lobbied for those. As for the arrested accounts of Ukrainian International Airlines, my understanding is that the carrier has not been in a very good financial situation overall, and it does owe, well, I heard that it owes something like 500 million hryvnia to Airport Boryspil, for example.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, because we had this week a statement from Ukrainian International Airlines, and they said that they do not recognize this debt to the Ukrainian government, and they will fight it in courts, and they think that this arrest is not justifiable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's I recall also hearing the statement of this kind, but my understanding from sort of the pieces of evidence that I am able to gather is that Ukraine International does not appear to be in a very good financial state, and I'm afraid actually that, I mean, this situation currently with the airline looks kind of fairly similar to what we had with Aerosvit, well, pretty much exactly 2 years ago. When the carrier was not paying its counterparties and it ended up going bankrupt. I hope that this is not going to happen to Ukraine International. And it could be in this context, right, you say that the carrier is trying to sort of use all means possible to get sort of
sure, yeah. Volodymyr, I just want to finish with a little bigger picture. What does what this particular incident does say about the current investment climate in Ukraine? Because Ukraine is desperately seeking for investments. And on the other hand, we see moves like this one with the Aviation regulations, which is practically shuts down the market for international companies. Maybe what we're seeing right now is not a deliberate attack on liberal market values, but a kind of chaos inside the government. Again, with those arrests of the presumably company that they're lobbying for, and then those new aviation rules and those desperate attempts of the Ukrainian government to gather as much international investors as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for all I know, there could be some sort of behind-the-scenes fighting between various interest groups. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what is going on and why those things are happening exactly, but as for investment climate, or as for the message that this decision or this proposal is sending to international investors into Ukraine, it's clearly not a good message. The best recipe for attracting foreign investment is basically to open up the market, tell the investors that, okay, invest into this country, we are going to ensure your property rights, we are going to sort of make sure that you are able to do your business with as little impediment as reasonably possible, etc. And that's when money will start flowing in. And if you are sending like messages that essentially can be interpreted as either that you are not interested in creating this the right environment for investment, or that there is something not sort of clear within your government. Obviously this, and on top of that there is a war going on in the country, obviously this will make investors extra cautious.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. It was Volodymyr Bilotkach from Newcastle University. He joined us via Skype from United Kingdom, and we actually talk a lot about these scandalous aviation rules. And what I understand Volodymyr told us, what we all kind of suspect right now at this point, that there is some power struggles still going on inside Ukrainian government. That's why we saw so many mixed signals, right? To arrest bank accounts and then to lobby for the same company, or presumably lobby for the same company, and then trying to do everything possible, traveling all around the world to gather money from investors. And I can understand why
it's an
they
interesting
don't get it.
situation, because what's clear is that it doesn't look transparent. You know, there are different theories about what's going on, but a lot of it.
Sure, it was signed on October 8th, right? And we found out about these regulations almost 2 months later.
Mm-hmm. So that's the question of why that's there. That's not the image of transparency that Ukraine is trying to present, and it's certainly not the one you want to try and attract investors. It also...
Well, I'm not so sure about that. If you're an investor and you're investing in third world countries or Eastern Europe, you're kind of very familiar with the local backroom deals. What enraged investors right now, and a lot of them are enraged that this lobbying is happening on the behalf of Ukrainian companies. I'm not sure that we would saw a lot of uproar if that lobbying was on behalf of British Airways or whatever other huge company.
Well, I mean, obviously any company that benefits from a situation is going to have a reason not to fight against it.
I'm not defending, just for the record, I'm not defending these aviation rules.
You're going for that. No, but I mean, it's looking at it, and you know, it's coming at this time as we were talking about it, where there's a lot of emphasis on reforms and trying to do things on one level, but this has been one very concrete example recently of things which haven't been transparent, which seem to be very much the game as usual, and not of an open market, not of a play, you know, maybe someone who specializes, as you're saying, third world countries, or countries where connections to the leadership are very important, but not a place trying to be more open. Certainly not the Georgian model that they had after the Rose Revolution.
It's true, and liberal reforms in finances or investments, that's what this government always says it wants to do. But again, with these aviation rules, it's still the big question whether or not it's a freak accident or it's something that we will see later down the road.
No, and as we're looking for developments, we're moving closer and closer towards winter. So one thing, of course, is the front of transport and all of that, and business, and certainly people who like to use the flights to get somewhere warmer during winter. But we also have a video. We want to show you a different aspect of Ukraine as it gets a bit colder, closer to the front, how Ukrainian soldiers are doing in eastern Ukraine with the oncoming cold.
Да, позвонили хлопці, спитали, можеш? Можу. Собирав металолом, а поїхав на металолом, де приймають, обміняв, скажімо так, мусор на балони, на труби. І став, зробив. Позвонив, хлопці приїхали, забрали.
Ну ми так, надо ребятам допомагати, надо, щоб їм було там хоч як-небудь, якісь там тепло, зима ж на дворі все-таки. Да, мы сейчас не стоим с автоматом в руках, кому-то и тут надо быть. И чем мы можем.
Now we go to another big topic this week, and this was the visit of NATO's General Breedlove to Kyiv, and it just started the whole huge new topic in NATO and lethal aid to Ukraine. And there are a lot of discussions right now already whether or not to provide Ukraine with lethal aid, and should Ukraine join NATO, although NATO looks like doesn't want to see Ukraine inside this organization. Yes, and we are seeing right now a tweet from Christopher Miller from Mashable on General Breedlove's visit to Kyiv, and basically he didn't provide us with any kind of real news. It's true. We didn't see and didn't hear anything about lethal aid or support, actual technical support on the ground, although there are a lot of going on behind the scenes. There are a lot of NATO people working in Ukraine, helping out with training, helping out with partially intelligence. But again, that's not what Ukrainian government wants, and Ukrainian government wants obviously lethal aid. I want our producers to put on screen another related topic. Is actually this historic shift in the Ukrainian among Ukrainians towards NATO. What we're seeing right now is just like 3 polls, and you can see like poll from 2 years ago with this red is no for joining NATO, 62%, and just 2 years later, you just see this dramatic shift. Right now, in July, we had 44% of Ukrainians for NATO joining the bloc, and this month is already 51, and actually pollsters say that this number is constantly rising. Again, it's not very surprising because Ukraine in the middle of war, and in the middle of war with Russia, and everybody understands that to win war with Russia is practically not possible for Ukraine standing alone. That's why they're seeking those powerful unions with EU or NATO. The other question, whether NATO wants to see Ukraine in this bloc, whether EU wants to see Ukraine in this bloc, we don't have, unfortunately, all those clear answers at the moment.
But these numbers really matter. I mean, they always matter. It's a big shift. It's interesting for people because it's, going from...
It's historic shift.
It's historic shift. It's going from...
I am sorry, I interrupt you, because when they polled those territories in eastern Ukraine under Ukrainian control, they had, this November, they had 27% of support for joining NATO. And regularly in this area, this number of support is around like 3% is just margin of error.
No, I mean, it's interesting because this used to be a very fringe position in Ukrainian society. To be rabidly for NATO, that was the organization of American-led imperialist views, all of that. And so to have this shift is huge, but it also matters because what they've been talking about in this coalition agreement and Tymoshenko and the other parties is a referendum on NATO. So these, polls aren't just showing general views of NATO in society, but they also give an indication of whether or not a referendum on NATO membership for Ukraine, if it comes to that, would succeed.
It's true. We have very interesting interview from this week. We want to show it. It's from a spokesperson for the NATO. He was in Kyiv with General Breedlove, and our own Natalie Gumenuk talked to him about lethal aid, whether or not it's possible to finally see it in Ukraine, whether or not it's an even good idea, and actually about perspectives of Ukraine joining NATO. Let's watch.
NATO believes that the only a political solution will resolve the crisis. So therefore, adding more weapons is not going to make this any better. So by concentrating on non-lethal, we are not directly supporting the fighting. But it's a judgment call. NATO is a group of 28 allies. We have to get everybody to agree. Maybe some of our allies did think about weapons, but when NATO is based on consensus, and only when everybody can agree can you make a decision. And in this case, the only agreement we could get was for non-weapons or non-lethal equipment.
In this case, when there is the individual members, which are at the same time NATO members,
yes,
and they are allies, I mean, can they decide on their own without informing how this communication is going?
Yeah, indeed. We do, in most cases, a nation will decide bilaterally between its nation and Ukraine to provide different support, maybe weapons. It's always helpful if that nation tells the rest of the allies, we are going to do this for Ukraine. We've decided to do this. We want you to know that we're going to do this. They don't have to tell us, but, you know, and so nations are free to choose when you're being a part of NATO means you are in an alliance and you do things collectively, but it also respects that you can make national decisions outside of NATO.
Is there this still at this moment the discussion about some countries, some NATO members who are willing to give this aid, the military aid?
I'm not aware specifically that they have briefed us on that, but I'm aware of media reports that talk about discussions in their parliaments and in their capitals that they are considering weapons. And it may be that nations decide to send weapons to Ukraine, but that not make it public.
How much does it depend on the United States, and what is the U.S. doing in this?
Clearly
regard?
the U.S. is a very powerful nation. It has the resources to be able to give, to donate resources. I know that the U.S. has done great things here in Ukraine, not just military, but political support, support to industry, those sort of things. The embassy here is quite active. But yes, I mean, we recognize that the U.S. position on weapons or no weapons could influence other allies to do the same. But again, if you're asking NATO, we decided that the best thing to do would be to collect this money and
All right, as always, we want to remind you to be involved in our discussion using our Twitter account for Hromadske International, as well as the hashtag Hromadske, and Facebook for all of that. But now we're joined by Vladimir Yermolenko for the Media Monitor segment of Internews to talk to us a little bit about what the Western press has been saying this week.
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to begin with the discussion about Ukrainian politics, and the Western media are actively talking about, of course, the new parliament and the new coalition, and talking from different perspectives. For example, I'd like to draw your attention to an article in The Economist, which is called Tragedy and Farce. And here there is a discussion of a danger, of a risk of Ukraine returning to this, usual, typical for Ukraine after the Orange Revolution, long coalition building and debate between the president and the prime minister. Two other articles, one on BBC, another on New York Times, are focusing on particular aspects of this new policy, of this new government policy. One focusing on NATO, on the decision to move towards NATO. The other is focusing on the fight against corruption. And my personal impression is that many media are discussing that without really trying to display a broad picture, for example, without trying to discuss the coalition agreement, which is a comprehensive agreement, trying to build up some kind of a roadmap for reforms with clear deadlines, with clear commitments, with covering all the fields of Ukrainian life. And basically, the coalition agreement can be this start of reforms which we are long expecting. Another very interesting topic is Ukraine's economy, and here international media are focusing, of course, on the bad shape, on some kind of a dark shape of Ukrainian economy. saying that there is a devaluation, saying there is the increasing debt, increasing public debt, etc. But I'd like to draw your attention to some positive things, some positive story. And one is published, basically two stories are published by Forbes. One is an article asking whether Ukraine could become a new Silicon Valley, and it's a very interesting focus on Ukrainian startups, basically on IT sector, which is very promising, which is very kind of advancing, and the new young companies, new young IT firms, which are integrating globally, which are showing how Ukrainians can do business in this IT sector. For example, drawing attention to this particular very interesting startups like Jobble or Grammarly or others. And quoting, for example, an estimation from one site about freelancers, which is called Elance, calling Ukraine a third best place where you can find high intelligent people, high intelligent employees. Another article also in Forbes is about investment, who invests in Ukraine in a time of turmoil, and here it quotes Varel Freeman, who is executive advisor of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, saying there is a blast in Ukraine which is not sometimes appreciated by some other people who are focusing on headlines. So these are two articles drawing attention to some positive trends which are existing in Ukrainian economy, probably contrary to this, situation when the state still continues to be corrupt and the corruption still to be a matter, continues to be a matter. And the third topic, the last topic, is Russia. Of course, we always come back to Russia, and here very interesting piece by The Economist called Russia's Wounded Economy, where it draws attention to the fact that Russia is probably not as strong as it seems to be, that is basically already lost $100 billion of reserves last year, in which the corporate sector is hugely indebted and which is basically going towards the crisis. And two other articles which I would call symbolically Russia's wounded politics. One is in CNN by a journalist who hadn't had a personal experience of talking to Putin, and who is drawing this picture of Putin and of Russians, feeling themselves as to be encirculated and kind of under threat. And another piece is by Radoslaw Sikorski, who is the ancient former Polish foreign minister, now the head of the Polish parliament, who is denouncing all those myths, Russian myths, that basically it is the West who started aggression against Russia and by NATO expansion, etc., etc., and who's saying basically a very, very simple and very obvious argument that it was not a decision taken in Washington to enlarge NATO, but basically a decision taken in these particular states, in Warsaw, Prague, or Bratislava. So this is briefly it, and this is a picture of this week.
Thanks a lot. And we're truly digital show that's not just TV, so we have all those articles inside our media blog post, and everybody can actually go to our Twitter. I'm tweeting your link right away on our account. That's the last tweet, and if you go through that link, you will open Medium article of our Media Monitor, and you can read everything by yourself, looking at all those links with articles that Volodymyr just told us about. Yes, and also I want to ask you to continue sending your questions to us using Hromadske hashtag on Twitter. You can leave your comments or questions on our Facebook page right under our promo posters. We have a lot of them tonight. What I actually want to talk about tonight is great news. Too. We had record traffic on our later explainer. It's on Twitter wars and trolling between Ukraine and Russia. I want our producers to put that link on full screen. And this piece officially right now is the most popular piece that Hromadske International has ever published. Yes, this is it. We got so many retweets for that and reactions from even popular people or famous people, like from Estonian president, who is kind of Twitter king, I think, in Baltics at least, and even from the Medium team, and they called out our piece on Twitter wars between Ukrainian and Russian trolls just smart, which is kind of really cool and nice. Yes, I think so too. Go to our Medium page or go to our Twitter. There are a lot of links there how to get to our explainers. And there is other very exciting news that I want to share. Probably sometime next week or so, you can finally can access our new site. What I'm gonna show you is just like preview, and producers, please put that on our on our screen. Yep, that's
it's beautiful.
Yes, that's how our that's Russian website. You just click on English version. Could you do that, please? Yes, I love Russian version, but what I care about right now.
I can't really decide between them, but you know.
We can vote afterwards. Yes, this is our future website, and you can access it very soon, and we will definitely let you know when it's going to happen, probably sometime next week. Thanks a lot for supporting us online. Thanks a lot for sharing our content. I really hope you will continue doing that.
And as always, we have two fronts. We want to keep you involved, we want to keep you invested, and in addition to looking at the bigger political issues, we like to look at the situation on the ground and what's going on. So we have another video for you filmed by our Hromadske team, looking at the situation of internally displaced people being removed from their homes and relocated to elsewhere, and the challenges they face.
Ну, близится зима, конечно, это самое. Потребности, вот ее одеть не могу никак. Гуманитарная помощь, которая, короче говоря, никакой. Верхняя одежда, тут обуть проблема. Она инвалид после инсульта. И вот это психологически, конечно, тяжело, хочется домой. Коляска нам досталась, в общем-то, с мусорника. Спасибо вот местные слесаря, вот довели ее. Она была разбита до основания. Мы из Макеевки, Донецкой области. Приезжали очень тяжело, волонтеры нам помогали. Только волонтерская помощь была. Тяжело очень. На перекладных, через Харьков мы ехали сюда. Но дело в том, что у нее инвалидности не было. Она уже была пенсионерка, когда у нее случился инсульт. Инвалидность мы не оформляли, потому что там мороки много. И никто ж не знал, что придется так уезжать. Пенсии мы не получали, только здесь нам удалось оформить пенсию, перевести сюда вот недавно. Ей я уже смогла получить, а себе еще вот обещаю только перевести. Зависит. Как только, если бы там прекратилось вот это вот все обстрелы и была возможность хоть как-то жить там. Во-первых, я звонила знакомой своей, она живет, правда, не в нашем поселке, а в районе немножечко подальше. Она говорит, во-первых, пенсии не платят. Макеевка, Донецк, пенсии не платят, зарплат не платят людям. Отопление, вот зимний сезон движется, отопления, говорят, не будет, вот центральное отопление. Спрашивается, как вот с инвалидом выжить, даже если мы чудом обратно туда поедем. Хотелось бы очень вернуться, потому что жить без дома и морально тяжело. И вот на старости лет бросаешь все, практически все бросили, что нажили за это время. Ну пусть она квартира не фешенебельная, не в шикарном доме, не дорогая, но это было наше жилье, наше, которое нам осталось вот от покойного мужа.
All right, welcome back. So as you know, at the end of the show, sometimes some of our hosts, we like to take a little bit of time to focus on one issue. The one I want to look at is this particular moment that we face in Ukraine right now. As you've heard from the beginning of the show and throughout, this is a special time. Ukraine is facing challenges, and its ability to meet them or not will determine the country Ukraine becomes. Now, what are the proofs for that? We have one nice tweet from the Kyiv Post regarding U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt's comments at the Tiger Conference. He said there that the greatest single risk factor for Ukraine is business as usual. Now, what does that mean? That means that after Maidan, after all this change, after these new parties and all of that, that Ukraine could slip back into business as usual. That means backdoor deals, that means doing things for the financial advantage of a few, and not to try and improve the country, to create a more transparent economy, more democratic system, and all of those elements. Now, with that, there is distinct pressure. Ukraine does not have the luxury of time, and one of the key elements when it comes to that argument is looking at economics. So if we can bring up one image here, we can look at the hryvnia versus the dollar, which has not fared well since the revolution started. Now, it started out at about 8 hryvnia to $1 when Maidan back in January, and currently it's around 15. That places all kinds of pressures on anything that needs to be imported, and also creates a volatility in the market. You know, because one of the things we have to deal with is trust. Do foreigners, do people with money, do the people who want to support Ukraine, all these people, do they trust Ukraine, do they trust the market? Now, another element of this is the foreign reserves, and we have another graphic of that, where you can see the different columns. You don't need to go too much in the numbers. I know not everyone feels tremendously comfortable with them, but what you can see is that the numbers are going down. Ukraine's reserves are very, very low at the moment. That has to do with the economy. It also has to do with the International Monetary Fund, with the loans that Ukraine can get, and that means that Ukraine has very little leeway. In order to pay pensions, in order to keep all these things going, Ukraine needs money, and the economy is still contracting, which makes that very, very hard. Coming to that, especially for average Ukrainians, what makes life difficult right now is inflation. So we have another graphic of core inflation, which most recently was about 14.1%, which is very high because people, you know, economics are hard. People don't have the opportunities that they maybe had a year ago or 2 years ago, or especially before the crisis, and prices are going up for different commodities and creates an unstable situation. So the demands are very high. People want to see change. They're willing to put up with a lot. Ukrainians have put up with a lot and continue to, but they want to see results for that. And that's what really limits things for the current parliament. Though, you know, they may have elected the speaker the fastest they've ever had, or a prime minister they've ever had, that is not change that affects people's lives yet. And that's why people will be watching very closely to see where things move from there. So, you know, and what else is there? We've briefly touched on the issue of IDPs. So we have this article from the Globe and Mail, which came out recently, and that was looking at these different narratives that are being developed. So people who flee their homes, if they stay in the same country, they're known as IDPs, internally displaced persons. And if they go to another country, they're known as refugees. And this article was looking at the stories, one person who went to Russia, another person who went to Kyiv. The really sad thing is that in this story, there is a Mr. City who, you know, had described himself being in Donbass as being patriotic, defending Ukraine. And when people choose where they go in these difficult situations, that plays a role. If they support Ukraine, if they support these reforms, they tend to go west. If they feel alienated from it, they feel alienated from Kyiv, they tend to go east and to go to Russia. What was very sad about this is describing the sort of facilities that were provided for these IDPs and describing what he said was harassment by one of these battalions, the Battalion Aidar, who's claiming these people from eastern Ukraine were Russian spies and all of that. He said, "I stood up for my country when I was in Donetsk because I was a patriot. I'm not a patriot anymore." And this is frustrating, for as long as this situation continues, as long as there is violence, as long as people are thrown onto, you know, dependent on the state and the social welfare network, which is having a very hard time, especially because of the financial reasons we pointed out, this creates pressure. And that also has issues politically. If we go to another link, there's a very interesting story in the New Yorker this week, which is looking at Kaka Belokidze, and who is responsible for the Georgian economic reforms following the Rose Revolution. And he really achieved a lot in trying to make the market more transparent and doing all of that. Now, there are also rumors, as we mentioned before, there is talk of making foreigners ministers in Ukraine's new cabinet to try and use their expertise to modernize Ukraine and make it better. And recently, he was in Ukraine. He was at, let me see if I can find it, blah, blah, blah. Oh, no, I don't.
He was in Ukraine, actually, and
he was, yeah.
And he was advising the Ukrainian government on reforms. There are a lot of rumors were floating around.
I found it. So he was at the Kyiv School of Economics, And his response to Ukrainians talking about the situation is he said, "You keep electing populists, people who promise you more. This means you're electing the worst." And so the point that I was trying to make is that if Ukraine doesn't make reforms, if they don't get things done, people's tolerance will be used up, and there will be a backlash, a populist backlash. And that is very dangerous because many of the things Ukraine needs to do to get ahead, at least in my opinion, are not easy. But if there isn't progress that comes with it, if after a certain period of time that doesn't arrive, then it'll make it very hard for these parties to continue to get support. I don't know. What's your view on that, Nixon?
I think all those, to recap briefly, all those topics we talked about today, and it was the coalition, whether or not it's survivable, and whether or not they will be able to hold that historic supermajority, which is really a rare event for Ukrainian history. The second issue with those aviation rules, that actually they kind of show us that maybe Ukrainian government were in too much chaos to proceed with liberal reforms, or maybe they're just go back to backroom deals. And third issue with lethal aid and NATO, joining NATO, which is very something that regular Ukrainians care about right now. They want to be protected. But all these three topics that were talked today, they revolve around this, and a lot of people call it the war mentality. And the war mentality that prevents Ukraine not only from reforming, but to address a lot of all those topics in an adequate way. For example, regulations, as I was talking with our guests on aviation regulations, the main talking point from the government, we want to protect our aviation industry because of the war, because we lost so much, because we need to protect a lot what we have left with.
And what makes it so hard is that this crisis, whether or not it's the war or the protests or just the Ukraine crisis in general, it's ongoing. And there can be a temptation to make special allowances for something, this is a difficult time, this is a difficult month. But the issue is if that crisis doesn't stop soon, as it doesn't seem to, it makes it very hard to develop the sort of country that Ukraine's reform-minded politicians have promised to.
Sure, and we had a lot of guests on previous shows. They all said to us, a lot of analytic minds, very bright minds, they all said that this war should not be excused for any kind of delay in reforms. This war should not be excused for any kind of human rights violation, and this war should not be any kind of excuse for anything. And we have parallel processes. One is in eastern Ukraine to defend Ukrainian sovereignty, and the Ukrainian government tries to do that. The other one should not be related to that, although they're interconnected, but reforms, that's the main point. That's the main talking point for the Ukrainian government. For President Poroshenko, he gave today a very important interview to German television saying that they want reforms right away, so quick, let's do it now. But at the same time, when it comes to some kind of sketchy issues, he always says like, well, we have a war on our hands, that's too much for us to care about other stuff. That's, I think, the main line to put an end to this war mentality that prevents Ukraine from reforming.
And those are really the things we want to keep looking at. What is being done and how is the government responding, and are they using the crisis as a way out, not to address some of these tough issues?
Thanks a lot for joining us this week. It was the Sunday show from Hromadske International. We will come back to you next Sunday at the same time, and we hope you'll tune in to watch us. I'm Maxim Ristavi and Bateson. Thanks for your time. See you soon again.